To a point, I am a champion of this film. I don't think it matches the original 1933 film in its bordered perfection and circumstantial techno-aesthetic grace, though Jackson's film is coming from a place of love, enthusiasm, passion, and excitement, which begs to be commended but also questioned and critiqued for its priorities and possible blind spots. Firstly, if the idea of King Kong had been inexplicably only formulated in the 21st century, somehow, it would be laughed out of a Hollywood pitch meeting. Cinema and society had moved on. Giant monsters and VFX spectacles had moved into a different place. In the 30s, spectacle for spectacle's sake could take the form of a goofy, though wholly lovable and adored, giant gorilla. By the 90s even, audiences expected scientifically designated dinosaurs, empirically plausible yet still thrilling monsters, or grandiose space operas which left Flash Gordon in the dust. The point is, to remake King Kong in the 21st century because Jurassic Park was enormously popular would be like remaking Flash Gordon because Star Wars was. And they tried that, it didn't make much money, and they had enough sense to treat the material as camp, which is really why anyone, or partly why, myself included of course, enjoy that Mike Hodges Flash Gordon film. Mike Hodges was a stellar film director. His television debut, 1969's Suspect, proved this from the get-go. Every subsequent film almost would confirm this further. Transforming 1980's Flash Gordon into a wholly admirable film production is a thing to behold, frankly. As is Ornella Muti as Princess Aura. What a gift to that film's obvious target audience. Anyway, 2005's King Kong is remaking King Kong not because King Kong is necessarily a good or timeless idea. It is within a framework of expectation and existential parameters, that moment of 20th century, potentially mostly American, pulpy genre adventure escapist fiction, unimaginable without certain economic factors, cultural barriers, and or scientific sophistication. It is because King Kong was a classic, might remain a major classic, depending on one's disposition, and is warranted to be treated, when adapting it, as though it were the gospel. As Mel Gibson had done of The Passion of the Christ, Peter Jackson did the sacred text of modern genre spectacle filmmaking as we know it, King Kong. Treat every plot or script detailing King Kong, expand it, explain it, grounded in a plausible reality. Reimagine the New York prologue as a believable lived-in Depression-era period drama, depict the natives as outright Sentinel Island people's analogues, project a partly believable depiction of prehistoric creatures, giant gorilla, theropods, sauropods, even insects and mollusks, whatever those spider pit lads are anyway. Somewhat, it all falls apart. An average audience member cannot help but think, you're taking a silly 1930s era idea, King Kong, and trying to make it believable, modern, admitting that you could only make this story work as a contemporary event during the 30s anyway, where the story was conceived, intended to be consumed within, and was inevitably always attached to inescapably. So Peter Jackson wants to make King Kong as perfect as possible, and via treating King Kong itself as almost sola scriptura revealed profundity, and like an adaptation of the Gospels must fill in the gaps with speculations upon how Jesus literally went about his behaviour, what everything looked like, and how important and significant all of it is or was, Jackson had to do so with his beloved King Kong. His attempts to make overly believable or serious the relationship, the romance of Ann Darrow and Jack Driscoll, indeed attempts to transform Driscoll into a serious character beyond the gruff, blandly masculine sailor of the original picture. Jackson includes even more dinosaurs, realistic to some degree, behaviour or violence or consequences which feel more considered than the more casual action and set pieces, by comparison at least, of the original title. Kong fights 3 T-Rexes, Vastosaurus. The T-Rex either would have evolved over 65 million years, or a different theropod would be on this isolated island ecosystem entirely. See what I mean by this film filling in every gap of this slightly cynical though well-meaning monster movie original, and attempting to make everything viable and reasonable for a more modern audience? Every prospective flaw, issue, silliness, or absurdity, implausibility of King Kong, the original, Jackson wanted to address correct with his remake. It may come across as too inane, bloated, overwrought, and overly serious, especially compared with the original it worships, although as a fellow follower devotee of 1933's King Kong, I cannot help but be captivated in witnessing the effort to stretch out every facet and detail of that King Kong film, electrify it, expand it, elongate it, elevate it, Tower of Babel's kind of, although the ambition is something I entirely celebrate. Not a perfect film. Actually, after they leave Skull Island, or even just when Anne is rescued by Jack from Kong initially, the film drags in a way that the original, I feel, does not. And that even the film prior to arriving on Skull Island, a very disliked segment of this film, utilised as an example when dismissing it, or often is, doesn't feel as overbearing to myself as like the final third of the film potentially. That could be because I am anticipating the Skull Island portion, of course. In fact, this is almost certainly the case, really. I am on board. I endorse it, although the common critiques are quite valid also. And that all being said, the Spider Pit sequence in this film, one of my favourite things in the 21st century genre cinema, to be certain. Thanks everyone for your time and patience, appreciate it. Thank you immensely.